The man who introduced himself to Hanrio's procurement team as a logistics consultant from a Dublin-based maritime advisory firm had a name that was, technically, true. Declan Calloway had been using pieces of the truth as camouflage his whole professional life. It was, he had learned from his father, the only kind of lie that never needed to be remembered later, because there was nothing to remember, only things left unsaid. He had flown in under a name that appeared on a real company letterhead, for a real meeting about real freight contracts that Callaway Maritime genuinely wanted, because the truest cover was never a lie. It was a life that simply happened to also serve a second purpose. He had been running this particular kind of double life since he was 22 years old. It no longer felt like performance. It felt most days like breathing, with an accent. Declan had been managing the loose, invisible web around his cousin's life since she was 18. He had never met her. He had watched her, at a professional distance, build an entire identity out of the belief that she had done it entirely alone, a doctorate, a firm, a reputation that now opened boardroom doors across 3 continents. He found more and more often that this bothered him in ways his father would have called sentimental and his uncle Seamus would have called dangerous. He had read every report on her for 17 years, the way another man might read letters from a pen pal he'd never allowed himself to write back to. He knew she took her coffee black until 2019, and then, inexplicably, switched to oat milk. He knew she'd cried in a hotel stairwell after her doctoral defense, alone, for 4 minutes, before going back out to accept congratulations with a face that gave nothing away. He knew things about her no cousin should know without ever having spoken to her, and it had started lately to feel less like protection and more like theft. Sienna was 3 slides into her Phase 2 rollout when the door opened and a man with an Irish accent and unhurried manners was shown in as part of a vendor review she had nothing to do with. Their eyes met across the room the way strangers' eyes meet, politely, briefly, forgettably. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, in an accent that pulled at something in her chest she couldn't immediately name. "Wrong floor, I think. Happens to the best of us," Sienna said, already turning back to her slide. Professional courtesy given and received in under 4 seconds. Neither of them thought of it again for the length of that meeting. Both of them thought of it, unexpectedly, later that night, for reasons neither could explain. Sienna found herself, an hour later, humming a tune she hadn't heard since she was 16, an Irish lullaby her mother used to sing over the kitchen sink, half remembered, the words gone, but the shape of it intact, surfacing for no reason she could name. Declan, riding back to his hotel, found himself thinking of his Aunt Bridget's laugh, which he had heard exactly once on an old cassette tape his father kept locked in a drawer and could not have said why. He finished the procurement meeting. He signed the freight terms Callaway Maritime had genuinely come for. He told himself walking out of the building that the accent and eyes coincidence meant nothing, that Seoul was full of strangers who happened to remind you of people you missed, and he almost believed it. Declan called his father that night, which he did rarely and only when something had shifted enough to warrant it. Cormac Calloway answered on the 3rd ring, the way a man answers who has spent his whole life expecting the call that changes everything and has learned to sound unbothered regardless of which call it turns out to be. "I was in a room with her today," Declan said. Cormac's voice on the other end went very quiet, the particular quiet of a man recalculating everything at once. "And?" She has Aunt Bridget's laugh. I only heard it for a second. She wasn't laughing at me. She was laughing at something on her phone, some assistant showing her something funny across the room. It went through me like a current. "You didn't tell her who you are." No." "Good. That's not your call to make. It's Seamus's." Declan said nothing to that. He had been saying nothing to that particular instruction for 17 years, and the nothing had started lately to weigh more than words would have. "She doesn't know we exist, Declan said finally. "She doesn't know Seamus exists. Not really, not what he is. She's 38 years old, and she thinks her mother's people were shipping clerks and church deacons. I watch her build her whole life on a foundation we poured for her in secret, and she thinks she poured it herself. She did pour it herself, Declan. We just made sure the ground didn't shift under her while she was doing it. That's not nothing. That's the whole point. Is it enough, though? To have kept her safe and never let her know she was loved doing it? Cormac was quiet a long moment. That question isn't mine to answer either, son. It's Seamus's. Same as it's always been. He stood beside her for years without her knowing his name. If secrets that close to home get your heart racing, subscribe. This family has more of them. By coincidence, that was not, in the strictest sense, a coincidence. Declan was staying 2 floors below her, a fact he had arranged with the deliberate carelessness of a man who told himself proximity was simply prudent. They ended up in the same elevator at close to midnight. I recognized the weight of it. Sienna only registered, again, the faint lilt in his voice, the specific green of his eyes catching the elevator light, her mother's exact shade, though she had no frame of reference to know that, and a strange, wordless comfort she filed under jet lag and moved on from. Long day, he offered, in the careful, easy tone of a stranger making elevator conversation, and nothing more. You have no idea, she said, and smiled. The real one, unguarded, the one that arrived when she'd stopped managing her own face for an audience. Declan felt the floor of the elevator drop out from under him in a way that had nothing to do with the mechanism carrying them upward. It was Bridget's smile exactly, not similar, not reminiscent, exactly, transplanted whole from a cassette tape and a handful of old photographs into a living woman standing 4 feet away from him in gym clothes and exhaustion, entirely unaware. Rough week or rough month, he asked, buying seconds he didn't need for a conversation that was already ending. Rough decade, if I'm honest. But who's counting? She laughed at her own joke, tired, unguarded. You're not from around here either, I take it. County Clare originally. Bit of a way from here. Something crossed her face. Small, quick, gone before he could name it. A flicker of the particular ache a person carries for a place they were once sent to grieve in and never fully left behind. I spent 2 years there once, she said. A long time ago. Different life. The doors opened on her floor before either of them could say anything else. She stepped out. She did not look back. He watched the doors close. He thought, she smiles like her mother did, and he thought, she still says County Clare like it costs her something. He thought, this is going to be harder than I told my father it would be, and reached for his phone, already composing what he would say to Seamus this time. Not a report on her schedule, or her movements, or who she'd been seen with. Something closer to a confession that he'd stood beside her for 11 seconds in an elevator, and it had cost him more than 17 years of watching from a distance ever had. That's this episode of Whiskey and War. If you're new here, welcome. Hit subscribe so you don't lose your place. Next episode, the second line. Trust me, you don't want to miss it.